Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. 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 Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap that screen.
Welcome Grumps to Wordle with Gaga.
Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Welcome Gaga and Grumps to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says, oh no, my pool.
Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps
Welcome
says,
Chris
pool.
Marvin to Wordle with Gaga.
Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
We would be honored if you would join
To
us.
the game grotto. Welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Welcome in, guys. Settle down. Grab your heartbeat. Share us round.
Grumps
Now
says
tap
hello,
that
everyone.
screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine. Gang gremlins on the scene. 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 Now tap that screen. Tap it, tap that screen. Yeah, tap it. Gang gremlins coming, let's go. Now tap
Gaga
that screen.
Grumps says, oh no, I have no text
Tap that
macros.
screen. Yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow. Gang gremlins on the scene. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen. Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says, hi guys, gimme a moment. Gaga Grumps says, welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play. Gaga Grumps says, I will have to copy and pass them. Gaga Grumps says, let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says, what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. H. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin renowned, like-a-thon, fingers on fire, like-a-thon, gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts be flying, like-a-thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word. Gaga Grumps says wrong text.
Welcome MIA to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps
Welcome
says
Kian
I've
and
given
Ella
you
to
the beat,
Wordle
now
with
let's
Gaga.
see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with H please Chris.
Welcome editor to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says hi there MIA and editor. Gaga Grumps says house you got.
Welcome MIAX to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says a yellow E in need of a home. Gaga Grumps says hi Ray bread fits. Gaga Grumps says we added a homeless A.
Welcome Ray Tolentino to Wordle with Gaga.
Ray Tolentino says teach.
Ray Tolentino says sorry no H.
Gaga Grumps says no H for teach. Gaga Grumps says meant works. Gaga Grumps says Alive's at number 3. T at 5E and then Homeless. Gaga Grumps says high key and I agree.
It's playtime! Gaga is in the box! Don't let her lose!
Good game.
Grumps is on the buttons! Don't let him push yours! Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly! Which team are you on? Team Gaga?
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Good game.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Team Gaga, 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 Team Gaga, give a cheer! Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says doodle the Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Welcome Fatakab and Privatili
Gaga
to Wordle
Grumps
with
says
Gaga.
let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says hey fatty, welcome back. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Welcome Hugo to
Welcome
Wordle with
Hugo to
Gaga.
Wordle
with Gaga. Grumps says at Fatakab and Privatili 123 welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. S.
Ray Tolentino says Steam.
Gaga Grumps says on the nose key and lol.
The creative one says hi everyone.
Welcome LL Creative to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
tap like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with S, please, Kian.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says is it still space? Gaga Grumps says space you got.
Welcome J-Li to Wordle with Gaga.
The creative one says tracked.
Welcome I to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says nice start. A and C live at 3 and 4 Wordle Street. E needs a home.
Ray Tolentino says teach.
Gaga
Welcome
Grumps
Ryan
says
Winter
hi
to
there,
Wordle with
JHE
Gaga.
and creative. Gaga Grumps says let's check the each trap with teach and then see if we need to filter. Gaga Grumps says wait, did it just let me replay the same game? Ryan Winter 64 says exact.
Welcome Danaboe ha 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 to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says we just had an act.
Well, creative one says exact.
Welcome to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says it did do it to me once before not marking the game complete and letting me play it again.
Welcome Oscar to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks seems PG, but you did it wrong.
It's a performance night. Explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Grumps says it's happening.
3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga.
Good game.
Emojis make her happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day. Fireworks for Gaga.
The creative one says maybe get the updated version.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says it's the web, not the app. Ryan Winter 64 says fireworks. Gaga Grumps says yep, it will still let me play that day again. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, B. Gaga Grumps says I'm a bit slower today guys, my right text buttons aren't working. I can't go copy and paste. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with B please Ryan.
Ryan Winter 64 says beast.
Gaga Grumps says beast you got. Gaga Grumps says a yellow E in need of a home.
Ryan Winter 64 says cheer.
Gaga Grumps says Moa fits.
O Creative 1 says mover.
Gaga Grumps says E lives at number 4. O needs a home.
Oscar says all did a word.
Gaga Grumps says there's your pattern I think. Gaga Grumps says hi Oscar the first can try it. but I think I know what it is.
Well, creative one says old.
Gaga Grumps says creative got there.
Ryan Winter 60 for says oiled.
Gaga Grumps says I was wrong.
Oscar says video.
Ryan Winter 64 says video.
Well, creative one says video.
Gaga Grumps says video for Wordle in 4. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
A Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra ra ra. Will the fireworks fly?
Good game.
A random star chosen by fate. Play your part. It's a live date.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Creative one says it sorts puzzles by days.
Gaga Grumps says letter blindness is a symptom of the game.
Get it in 3. It's do or die. Only in 3. A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga. Da da da. A Wordle with Gaga. Ra
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Well, creative one says at Chris Marvin our brains are adjusting lull.
Gaga Grumps says I keep hitting my buttons for text. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Oscar. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says oh, just accidentally discovered my buttons are copying my texts. That's helpful at least. Gaga Grumps says we'll playing that game again. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. V. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like-a-thon, race to the top, like-a-thon, tap and don't stop, like-a-thon, who will be crowned, like-a-thon, gremlin
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
gremlins don't tire, like-a-thon, hearts beat flying, like-a-thon, gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says shy in the house.
Welcome D tilde V tilde Peter Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with V, please Ryan.
Ryan Winter 64 says video.
Gaga Grumps says video, you got lol. Gaga Grumps says yellow O in need of a home.
Ryan Winter 64 says often.
Gaga Grumps says hi B, short fits.
Welcome RB to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says S moved into number 1 and O into 3.
Welcome Handy to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says sonar no longer fits.
Ryan Winter 64 says scone.
Gaga Grumps says no E for scone.
Ryan Winter 64 says I was hungry for a scone lol.
Welcome Jazz. Siren to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says we can spin it and see. Ryan Winter 64 says spoon. Gaga Grumps says it is valid and gave us a green N at number 5.
Well, Creative One says spoon.
Gaga Grumps says spoon for Wordle in 4. Gaga Grumps says Wordle says no.
Ryan Winter 61st says, oh my god.
Gaga Grumps says why Chris. Gaga Grumps says swoon is all I see. Gaga Grumps says me either Chris lol.
Welcome Izzy to Wordle with Gaga.
Welcome, Gremlin, to the game grotto. Welcome, Gremlin.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Settle down, grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. It's your warm-up routine.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily hearts, claim your points and prepare to play.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a calling for your daily hearts. Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart shy.
Jay says evening.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next one.
Gang gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says did you let the boys play with my buttons shy? They know work lol. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. I. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Chase says no, but Maisie is looking suspicious.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thun. Tap and don't stop, like a thun. Who
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with I please Grumps.
Grumps says ideal.
Gaga Grumps says ideal you got. Gaga Grumps says yellow D and E in need of homes.
Welcome RX Yan to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says half atty. Ryan Winter 64 says trude. Gaga Grumps says are we starting do or ending ed lol? Gaga Grumps says I don't think trude will be valid. Drone fits. Gaga Grumps says D moved into number 1 Wordle Street. O and E are homeless.
Ryan Winter 64 says dowel.
Ryan Winter 64 says NVM.
Gaga Grumps says dowel is a good shout. Gaga Grumps says except for the L lol.
Ryan Winter 64 says decoy.
Gaga Grumps says there's lots of do-ed. Gaga Grumps says gonna check the trap with doped. Gaga Grumps says decoy is still valid.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
It's playtime!
Gaga Grumps says sorry Ryan lost you fireworks there.
Don't let her lose! Grumps is on the buttons!
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Let those stickers fly!
Good game. Good game.
Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says Diva Diva Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Game! Gremlins, let's go! Game! Gremlins, let's go!
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. G. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon?
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with G please Ryan.
Ryan Winter 64 says guard.
Welcome to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says guard you got.
Welcome private account to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says hey there hope nice to see you.
Welcome Malibu to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says you lives at number 2 Wordle Street.
Ryan Winter 64 says tunes.
Gaga Grumps says hi Malubal.
Welcome Amelia Skatsai Shuffles to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps
Welcome
says
Simon
clean
Rose to
fits.
Wordle with Gaga.
Ryan Winter 64 says quote.
Gaga Grumps says Q lives at number 1. E needs a home. Gaga Grumps says hi Amelia.
Ryan Winter 64 says quiet.
Ryan Winter 64 says quiet.
Grump says that Amelia Skatsai Shuffles hair.
Gaga Grumps says quote works.
Welcome Physics to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says quite is it.
Welcome Enon to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Ra-ra-ra. Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by fate. Play a part. It's a live date.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.
Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says hi to everyone that came in on the end there.
Get it in 3. It's do or die.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab the daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga. Da-da-da. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. E. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Race to the top like a thorn. Tap and don't stop like a thorn. Who will be crowned like
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says fifth like goal smashed, awesome tapping. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with E, please Grumps.
Grumps says Ebola.
Gaga Grumps says deadly lol. Ebola you got. Gaga Grumps says Wordle says no lol.
Ryan Winter 64 says every.
Grumps says outrage. Welcome Clarilis to Wordle with Gaga. Grumps says enemy.
Gaga Grumps says outrage doesn't STSRT with E and is too many. Gaga Grumps says enemy is in the grid.
Claire Alice says I'm so glad I came in just in time for Ebola as a guess.
Ryan Winter 64 says Coney.
Gaga Grumps says Y lives at number 5E and N need homes. Gaga Grumps says he's trying to spread a virus.
Claire Ellis says Boney.
Gaga Grumps says honey works.
Grumps says at Claire elicits a glorious word and username.
Gaga Grumps says no change.
Claire Alice says I don't want his viruses.
Ryan Winter 64 says needy.
Gaga Grumps says we do try fatty.
Welcome Trina to Wordle with Gaga.
Trina says hello, peeps.
Gaga Grumps says E can't be in 3. Gaga Grumps says Trina in the house.
Claire Ellis says Bendy.
Grumps says at Clara List that's what they all say.
Trina says Penny.
Gaga Grumps says you heard about the Ebola, didn't you, Trina? Lol.
Trina says no.
Claire Ellis says no pen in wrong place.
Grumps says at Trina welcome back.
Gaga Grumps says N can't be in 3 either.
Trina says at Gaga and grumps her. Lol, not a clue what you mean.
Claire Ellis
Welcome
says
you
veiny.
NER to Wordle with Gaga.
Trina says at Grumps, thank you. Ryan Winter 64 says veiny.
Gaga Grumps says cause you just missed the grumpy one guessing Ebola for this one and Wordle said no. Gaga Grumps says Yuto someone is making Grumps push their buttons.
Grumps says at Ryan Winter 64 bragging, are you? Welcome Saron to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says E lives at number 2. N must live at 1.
Ryan Winder 64 says Nefty.
Trina says, oh dear law, I think they're trying to add to the Ebola problem.
Gaga Grumps says can't be needy.
Claire Ellis says Nardy.
Gaga Grumps says nerdy is in the grid.
Good game.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Welcoming guys, settle down, grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, it's your warm-up routine. Gang Gremlins on the scene.
Gaga Grumps says welcome Gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to go.
Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Gang Gremlins.
Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it. Let's see those team stickers flow.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Claire and Trina.
Now tap that screen. Now tap that screen.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next one.
gremlins on the scene.
Trina says add Gaga and Grumps.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. C. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list.
Gremlins define.
Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
Gaga Grumps says your word starting with C please Ryan.
Ryan Winter 60 for says court.
Gaga Grumps says sixth like goal smashed woot. Gaga Grumps says court you got.
Trina says at Fatigab and Privatili 123 there was no Gouda that you got overtaken. Sorry, bad dad joke. They'll leave now.
Gaga Grumps says yellow are in need of a home.
Ryan Winter 64 says river.
Claire Alice says river.
Gaga Grumps says oh god dad jokes. Gaga Grumps says river fits and tests two places for the R.
Trina says I'm not even a parent, I still give myself permission, haha.
Gaga Grumps says and it lives in both of them. Greedy greedy.
Ryan Winter 64 says rider.
Gaga Grumps says trap. Check for options.
Claire Ellis says radar.
Or Creative One says ruder.
creative one says rider.
Trina says rager.
Well, creative one says raver.
LL Creative One says Novi.
Ryan Winter 64 says rarer.
Gaga Grumps says okay, we have enough guesses, I think.
Claire Alice says maybe try lambs as a filter.
Gaga Grumps says yeah, I see rager, rarer and raker. I don't think they'd use the P. Gaga Grumps says maybe Aurora.
Welcome Roshana to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says let's check rager and think about filter if confirmed. Gaga Grumps says it's not an A.
LL Creative One says rarer.
We would be honored if you would join us.
Oh, creative one says rider.
Welcome Precious to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says I'm not sure on rider, let's have a look.
Precious says hi.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Precious, how you doing? Gaga Grumps says Wordle says no to rider.
Grump says it Precious _Hayer.
Precious says it Gaga, and Grumps am good, thanks, hope you're well.
Precious says it Grumps high.
Gaga Grumps says must be an E.
Well, creative one says reeler.
If you would join us.
Well, creative one says to long.
Welcome Big DOYB Levitate Agency CEO to Wordle with Gaga.
Precious says refer is all I see.
Grump says at Big Doib Levitate Agency CEO Hayer.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for doing your daily heart, Dan.
Ryan Winter 64 says refer.
Claire Liss says refer. Gaga Grumps says yep, all I see if refer to.
Or Creative One says, that's a good one.
Good game.
Or Creative One says refer.
Gaga is in the box. Don't let her lose.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Don't let him push yours. Are you ready to play? Let those stickers fly. Which team are you on? Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game, Gremlins, let's go. Game,
Gaga Grumps says doodle for Gaga. Share the live chat the chat and shower her with roses and GGs.
Team Gaga, give a cheer. Team Grumps, are you here? Team Gaga, are you ready? Team Grumps, are you steady? Game, Gremlins, let's go. Game, Gremlins, let's go.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab the daily heart while I set up the next word.
Game, Gremlins, let's go. Game, Gremlins, let's go.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A, D. Precious says Daisy. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire like
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says 7th like goal smashed your fingers rock. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with D please fatty. Gaga Grumps says Daisy you got.
The Creative One says congrats, Phil.
Ryan Winter 64 says at FATIKBUNPRIVAT Igley 1 to 3 luck.
Gaga Grumps says yellow A&S in need of homes.
Trina says strap.
Gaga Grumps says cheesy. LL Creative One says sauce. Gaga Grumps says strap fits.
Pressure says shout.
Welcome Millar to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says S lives at number 1 Wordle Street. Gaga Grumps says T and are still homeless.
Ryan Winter 64 says SHAR.T.
Gaga Grumps says oh shalt feels like a wordly word.
A creative one says shout.
Precious says shaft X.
Gaga Grumps says thought we had it then.
Or Creative One says shaft.
Ryan Winter 61st says shaft.
Gaga Grumps says we got shafted. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga.
Good game.
Wordle with Gaga. Will the fireworks fly? A random star chosen by fate. Play a part. It's a live date. Wordle with Gaga. Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says we do the daily Wordle. I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
It's do or die, only in 3. A pretty sky. A Wordle with Gaga. A Wordle with Gaga. Da da da. A Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. F. Gaga Grumps says wahoo fatty. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
tap like a thon. Tap and don't stop like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned like a thon. Fingers on fire like a thon. Gremlins don't tire like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with F, please, Ryan. Gaga Grumps says if your word is being filtered, try I'd like word.
Ryan Winter 64 says first.
Gaga Grumps says first you got.
Ryan Winter 64 says I like
Welcome
word
Jazz
free.
to Wordle with Gaga.
Well, Creative One says sound.
Ryan Winter 64 says shaft.
Gaga Grumps says sorry that one came through too late. Gaga Grumps says sound fits. Gaga Grumps says S lives at number 1 Wordle Street.
Welcome Adam Fool
Trina
to
says
Wordle with
shake.
Gaga.
A creative one says savor.
Gaga Grumps says hey Adam, nice
Welcome
entrance.
Doga Black Butterfly to Wordle with Gaga.
Well, Creative One says spec.
Gaga Grumps says close, very close.
Precious says spec.
Ryan Winter 64 says spec.
Gaga Grumps says spec is in the grid.
Welcome, Gremlins, to the game grotto.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Settle down, grab your heartbeat, share us round. Now tap that screen, tap it, tap that screen, yeah, tap it, it's your warm
The Creative One says I think I'm lagging.
Gang Gremlins on the scene. Gang Gremlins on the
Gaga Grumps says welcome gremlins to the game grotto. Take a seat, grab your daily heart, claim your points and prepare to play. Gaga Grumps says hey Zoba, stick around, we have a starting format. Gaga Grumps says treasure box up if you need a coin for your daily heart.
Game gremlins on the scene. Oh, oh, oh. Now tap that screen. Oh, 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 oh.
Gaga Grumps says don't be sorry you didn't know. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next group.
On the scene.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
Creative One says at Gaga and Grumps, what season is it in the UK?
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. H. Gaga Grumps says a freaking rainy one lol. Gaga Grumps says we're on day 50 plus of rain.
Creative One says lol.
Gaga Grumps says it's winter, nearly spring. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
The creative one says that Gaga and Grumps well.
Like a thong, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned.
Trina says was it raining again today? It's been nice in Bristol.
Gremlins don't tire like a thon. Hearts beat flying like a thon. Gremlins defying.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says I haven't looked outside today lol. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with H please Ryan.
Ryan Winder 64 says handy.
Grumps says treasure box is open.
A creative one says happy.
Gaga Grumps says it looked wet when I let the dog out this morning, but I didn't check whether it was raining or not. Gaga Grumps says handy you got. Gaga Grumps says a green A at number 2 and AD in need of a home.
Oh, creative one, says Badge.
Gaga Grumps says now sure paddle is a word, but I'll give it a spin.
Ryan Winter 60 says valid.
Gaga Grumps says it isn't. Gaga Grumps says Badge fits.
Ryan Winter 64 says cadet.
Gaga Grumps says D moved in next door to A and now E needs a home. Gaga Grumps says you never know what words have been adopted into English.
The creative one says cadet is likely.
Gaga Grumps says cadet works. Gaga Grumps says you know what that means.
It's a performance explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with glee. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay. Smileys in
Wood Creative One says tap everyone else. We can reach 100K for Gaga.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat. Gaga Grumps says wow yes 100K is in reach. Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet, grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid. Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. F. Gaga Grumps says 110k taps is our record, by the way.
Creative One says 100k likes.
LL Creative One says W chat. Gaga Grumps says awesome taps. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Like a thon, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with F, please, Ryan. Gaga Grumps says are we getting freaky again?
Ryan Winter 6 for says, I guess N, F before the wheel to lol.
Ryan Winter 64 says fraud.
Gaga Grumps says fraud you got.
Thanks for the follow!
Ryan Winter 64 says erupt.
Gaga Grumps says a green our lives at number 2 Wordle Street.
Trina says crown.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for following Lulu. Gaga Grumps says crown fits. Gaga Grumps says hi Emma.
Ryan Winter 64 says brown.
Trina says prong.
Oh Creative One says drone.
Ryan Winter 64 says bro.
Welcome Emma Heart Hands to Wordle with Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says a green O moved in next door and N is homeless. Gaga Grumps says prom fits, needs an N Emma.
Fireworks for
Gaga Grumps says are you ready?
It's a performance and explode 'em on her face. She's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 3. Let's see those fireworks. Gifts and emojis will explode on Gaga's face.
Emojis make her happy. As in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will
Trina says 11 AK.
If you can, that's okay. Smileys in chat still win the day.
A Creative One says 110K.
Good game.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Trina says now time to beat it.
Gaga Grumps says record-breaking tappers awesome work.
Good game.
Gaga Grumps says if you haven't done it yet grab your daily heart while I set up the next grid.
Ryan Winter 64 says at Trina I'm beating it.
Gaga Grumps says let's play Wordle. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now. Gaga Grumps says and for the third time we are starting with A. F. LL Creative One says F again. Gaga Grumps says wheel likes fatty. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Trina says at Body Fago is too short for the cheese option law.
Like a thumb, race to the top, like a thon. Tap and don't stop, like a thon. Who will be crowned like a thon? Gremlin renowned, like a thon. Fingers on fire, like a thon. Gremlins don't tire, like a thon. Hearts be flying, like a thon. Gremlins defy.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance.
Everybody get down! It's a freaking sniper!
Gaga Grumps says ha Trina with the snipe.
Trina says feast, fate is in an anagram, please sorry Ryan.
Gaga Grumps says I love how she does it at the last second. Gaga Grumps says OMG anagram cheese for the win.
Trina says forte.
Gaga Grumps says Wheel chose the right letter. E.T. wants to go home. Gaga Grumps says forte fits.
Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says fireworks for Trina and Fanta.
Explode 'em on her face, she's in a happy place. Fireworks for Gaga. Wordle within 3, so gifts explode with
Gaga
glee.
Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Make her happy, as in her face they slappy. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. From a single rose to a whole bouquet. Anything will be okay. If you can, that's okay.
Creative One says I'm trying to help get 120K.
Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga. Fireworks for Gaga.
Gaga Grumps says you're on a mission, creative.
Trina says my whole screen went blank then lol.
Gaga Grumps says okay, last grid coming up. Gaga Grumps says sometimes my reactions cause that, but it didn't reset here.
Look, Creative One says 120K.
Trina says no, it was my pet, not you.
Gaga Grumps says yay, highest we've ever had.
Trina says I got my keyboard attached and it's playing games, that's why I can't even with a tap lol.
Gaga Grumps says let's play our last Wordle of the day. Gaga Grumps says what letter will the wheel choose? Predictions in the chat now.
O Creative 1 says law.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting with A. P. Gaga Grumps says Trina on the nose. Gaga Grumps says leaderboard reset incoming. Tap those screens. The one wearing the crown at the end of the song chooses the first word.
Trina says at LL Creative when we know the wheel.
Like a thon, race to the top, like a thon, tap and don't stop, like a thon, who will be crowned like a thon, gremlin renowned like a thon, fingers on fire like a thon, gremlins don't tire like a thon.
Gaga Grumps says want to steal the starting word. Send the ranking crown and snipe the list. Gaga Grumps says I've given you the beat, now let's see your fingers dance. Gaga Grumps says your word starting with P, please, Ryan.
Ryan Winter 64 says pager.
Gaga Grumps says pager you got. Gaga Grumps says wheel and F. Trina chose right letter again.
Trina says prism.
Gaga Grumps says oh, a very wordly word.
Blossom VXZ says hello.
Trina says at LL Creative one always tomorrow.
Gaga Grumps says, and we have a burst water pipe up the road to add to all the rain lol. Gaga Grumps says are in need of a home.
Usam VXD says Porky.
Gaga Grumps says not affecting us, but it's on the news lol.
BLO some VXE says that Gaga and Grumps so used to me already don't get welcomed anymore, sad face.
Trina says porch.
Bullsom VXE says porch.
Gaga Grumps says we are starting poor.
Ryan Winter 64 says porch.
Gaga Grumps says sorry Blossom last grid, but tired. Gaga Grumps says porch is in the grid.
BLO some VXE says that Gaga and Grumps'll all seem very tired.
Gaga Grumps says Wordle in 4. Gaga Grumps says GG Gremlins. Let's see those W's in the chat.
Trina says thank you for the live as always.
Gaga Grumps says been studying Blossom. Gaga Grumps says you are very welcome.
BLO some VXE says that Gaga and Grumpsy are sadly stressed out.
BL0SSOMVXZ says bye.
Ryan Winter 64 says bye.
Ryan Winter 64 says who was top tapper. Gaga Grumps says I'm old but I left school at 16 with no qualies at all. Got a master's degree now.
Trina says take care and see you tomorrow.
Gaga Grumps says thanks for joining me to play Wordle. I will be back at 4 PM UK tomorrow for more Wordle with Gaga.
Grumps says good night everyone.
Gaga Grumps says do you do the daily Wordle? I post mine on my page and would love you to share your results.